All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles, where we prefer truth over narrative and principles over politics. And today we're going to try to cut through some of the noise, and this is going to be a little bit different. We're going to be discussing the aftermath of the assassination of Charlie Kirk and where the conservative movement goes next, especially when it comes to younger conservatives. By now, everybody knows what happened on September 10th, and it was. I really do believe that this was a seismic moment in American politics, and especially conservative politics. And I really kind of want to get the pulse of young conservatives across the country. So that's where my guest is coming from. And to basically to help us better understand what's going on here and where things might go next, I want to introduce my guest, Miss Maghdalen Rose of the Right Rose podcast. Welcome back to the program, sister.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad we're able to do this again. You're one of my main recurring guests on this program, so I'm glad you were able to make it.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad to be here.
All right. So before we get into the nitty gritty here, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience for those who may not know who you are, tell them what you're about, all that good stuff.
Definitely. So I do political commentary, and then I also work in communications and digital strategy for pretty much everything in the conservative libertarian sphere I handle in some way or another. And I got into politics about 8 years ago after the Parkland shooting because young conservatives were so under siege, especially because of gun control and David Hogg and the machine that he built with the help from Hollywood. So I handled political commentary from that and just giving the perspective, especially now, of younger conservatives who seem to be sort of assuming the mantle of power in a lot of ways.
Interesting. See, I didn't know that about you. I didn't know that it was the Parkland shooting that made you get into politics. I guess we all have our moment. Mine was 9/11. I lived through that.
Yeah.
I was about to turn 21. So what was it about the Parkland shooting that made you get into politics and start lending your voice to the discourse?
Yeah, definitely. So I was always a conservative and I was always a conservative politically, but I wasn't actively involved anyway. I was just a conservative person. And I think what was upsetting for me there, aside from the tragedy and everything that was unfolding, was that the young liberals from it who survived, like David Hogg, Emma Gonzalez, other ones from there, they were really pushing a narrative at the time that the issue was gun control and the issue was only gun control. And it was nothing to do with the fact that Nicholas Cruz had been flagged by teachers and guidance counselors for erratic behavior, that he was in because of Obama era policies that mandated that schools keep kids there if they wanted educational incentives on a federal funding level. And I felt like young conservatives, that was one of the moments where the attacks really began. Because any young conservative at that time, especially like, for example, Kyle Kashuv, who was a survivor of that, who had a conservative perspective, they were pretty much accused of just not caring about the loss of life. And I found that really disgusting. And a lot of young conservatives did. And I know it was a moment that mattered to a lot of us across the board. So I started to get involved in commentary and things just because I think young conservatives at that point were also really scared because we have to remember back then it was like we were on the heels of the UC Berkeley riots against Ben Shapiro, and it was a scarier time to be out there as a young conservative. So that was sort of my get involved moment, but I'd always been ideologically conservative.
Gotcha. So let's talk about the Charlie Kirk situation. First, just right off the bat, I want to know what was your immediate reaction when you first heard the news of Charlie Kirk's assassination? You probably found out about it on social media, I would guess. Well, what was your
Yeah.
immediate reaction?
Well, for me, it was sort of like horror that we were still at this place because I think a lot of us had kind of thought that we were in a time period that was a little bit like we'd won and we were going to keep winning and things were better. And a lot of Republicans, myself included, my family included, we've been operating in the it's all good now or it's better position. Whereas if this had happened when Biden was president, I think it would have been less surprised because of the volatility that was going on there. And then sort of the second feeling was, well, this is how it's always been. We've always been under this much danger. This isn't new. And I think like we had this idea for a little while that things were so much better and that that was an era of the past. And I bring up the Ben Shapiro UC Berkeley riots because that was a very dangerous time. And a lot of young conservative commentators were born of that time. And Kirk wasn't born of that time, he was already involved, but he started talking on college campuses much more after that. Michael Knowles came about, Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, obviously, and Tommy Lahren, like all from that era. And I think that the difference between people that age and people my age who got involved in 2017 and the young conservatives who got involved in 2020 or 2021 is there sort of like a knowledge gap about how dangerous all of this is. And the Charlie Kirk assassination really woke a lot of people up to the things that my generation has known about and olders have known about, but everyone else has kind of been living in this world of it's going to be better because Trump is going to save us.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's something that you and I have talked about, this whole idea that, the party or Trump himself is going to be the savior. But then we see, I mean, they tried to take him out twice. And I actually even
Yeah.
said on my podcast, I view Kirk's assassination, even if he had lived through it, I would view that as worse than what happened with Trump because Trump was a former president.
Yeah.
He was running for president again. We've had presidential assassinations at several points through our history. And even though it sounds bad, it's kind of more normal. This was a ground shaking moment for me because this was a person who was not in the government. He was not a politician, did not create policy, did not pass policy. And they still this person still shot him in the neck and murdered him. And to me, this was a passing of the Rubicon. Now, this isn't just against government officials, it's also against media figures, people on college campuses. And it kind of shows that, going back to the days of Ben Shapiro at Berkeley, you can't really say that things have changed, or they have changed, but not for the better.
Yeah.
They've gotten worse. Nobody killed Ben Shapiro. Nobody, as far as I know, even took a shot at him. I know he probably got death threats, but that's kind of normal for our space. So my thing is, do you think that this moment, kind of created a before and after for young and conservatives? Because, like, you think about 9/11 and people who lived through that think, oh, here, this was the world pre 9/11 and then the world after
Yeah.
9/11. Do you see Kirk's death as, do you see any similarities between Kirk's death and 9/11?
I do for a younger generation of conservatives. I think the ones that are 19, 20 now, it is a monumental shift. For people my age and older, it's horrible, it's memorable, but we knew this kind of danger existed. It didn't necessarily wake us up to it in the same way. And I think one of the things that, Kirk, he had become such a powerful man. And I was surprised to see him still in these campus debates because of the amount of responsibility he had. He was instrumental in making J.D. Vance vice president. He helped get RFK into that health spot. Caroline Levitt, our press secretary, said that he was a force in getting her press secretary. So I was surprised this time around to see him still doing this a little bit. And I think from the reportings that people around him were also surprised, and he felt it was so important because we had to keep a constant presence on those campuses. Because the second we leave, everybody swarms in from the left and they take over. And that was something that he was constantly fighting, and having a ground game there was important. I think for younger conservatives, several of them I've spoken to and friends with that are 19, 20, they're shocked. They're shocked that a bad thing like this could happen. And I think we need to be very clear with them that this is a terrible thing. And this is not the norm in terms of everyone will be assassinated or be hurt, but there is a danger level that you need to go into with your eyes open before you choose this versus being a nurse or something along those lines. And that's something I want to see more conservatives bring up, just so people have all the information before they go into it.
Yeah, I saw a video clip from Steven Crowder, and I think you may have posted this too on your
Yeah.
social media, and he was kind
Yeah.
of feeling a little guilty because he was on college campuses all the time having the change my mind debates, and he knew how dangerous it was. Whereas a lot of people didn't. See, to me, this didn't shock me. I already knew it was dangerous, and I could
Yeah.
already see the boiling point coming. I was not surprised about Kirk's assassination. I didn't expect it to happen specifically to him, but I expected it to
Mhm.
happen to somebody like him on the left or the right. I don't, and I think, and I really hope I'm wrong about this. I hope I'm wrong, but I think this is the start of something else. Like, I mean, I wouldn't be
Mhm.
surprised to see something retaliatory towards somebody on the left or it happening to somebody on the right again. Like I said, that Rubicon has been crossed. The seal has been broken.
Yeah.
So to me, that's what I'm concerned about. What about you? And maybe even since you're plugged into the youth conservative movement, how would you describe the emotional state of younger conservatives?
Well, I think a lot of them are still in sort of like the not jubilation in a bad way, but they're still in the celebrating of Kirk's life, and they're still in the state of he did all these things and the memorial, and it's very uplifting. And I have concerns that when that dust settles, which it inevitably will in a few days or a week or whatever it takes, and people realize what's been lost here, the grief that will come from that. Because right now we're still talking about him, we're still talking about the fact that he's gone and the things that he did. And we have people sitting in on his chair for the podcast. And I think Allie Beth Stuckley's there today. So there's still a constant memorial going on. When that ends, I think a lot of young conservatives are going to feel very leaderless. And that's a very dangerous thing to happen, especially amongst young conservatives, because the young conservative world is vicious, but it's also very small in a lot of ways. And when people lose a leader, it's very hard to find another one. And I see comments, young conservative men commentators trying to step up, and some of them are doing it gracefully, and some of them are overtly trying to become the next Charlie Kirk. And I really advise against that because what I don't think a lot of people realize is that he was not just a commentator, he was a kingmaker, he was an organizer. So when you position yourself to say you want to be the next Charlie Kirk, either privately to your team and to the media world or publicly, what you're really saying is that you want to offer a completely new structure to Republicans. You want to help them win elections. The amount of work he did to win elections, to me, is bigger than his commentary. So if you want to be the next Charlie Kirk, you have to understand that you're not going to just get a podcast deal. The grown-ups of the Republican Party will expect you to deliver the youth vote for them. And that's a very daunting task.
Yes, yes. And on top of that, I mean, Charlie Kirk was doing this since he was like, what, five? I mean, he started early. He started early and
Yeah.
he didn't get to where he was overnight. It took a while. And I think sometimes in this online space, we think that this stuff just happens overnight because for some it does. I mean, just to be frank, I mean, for some it does happen overnight and they get famous, not always deservedly so, but it happens anyway. They get pushed by the right people and they're able to get past the gatekeepers. But in general, if you want to have that kind of impact, you got to put the work in. And I want to talk more about that in just a little bit. But before we do, I want to go into what you think of the inevitable conspiracy theories that have cropped up after his
Yeah.
death. It seems like 5 seconds after the news broke, the conspiracy theories started, and then they just
Yeah.
snowballed, and we are where we are today with people pretending that it was the Israeli government who took him out, or yada yada yada. He was going to convert to
Yeah.
Catholicism. You know all of them. I actually wrote a big old article about it for my Substack, and I'm going to be doing a podcast about that as well. But what do you think of these conspiracy theories? Do you think they might have some merit, or you think there's some grifting going on, or what do you make of this whole thing?
So I find the ones where Candace Owens was pushing that he was going to become a Catholic really like disgusting because she's talking about another woman's husband and he was not even buried yet. And I really found it really grotesque. And like because it had also had no bearing on the story. Like it had no bearing on whether or not he was on how he was assassinated. It was irrelevant to what had happened. And she just wouldn't stop. And I am a Catholic, so I have no issue with him having possibly become a Catholic. But the idea that she was going to tell the world of his faith journey while his wife is trying to bury him, and they have two young children, one of which is like 3, the other one I think is 1, I found to be disgusting. But I also wasn't really surprised because it is Candace Owens in that sphere. And I think the rest of those conspiracy theories, I mean, a lot of it is born out of a great distrust of the government, which I understand.
Mhm.
But the other side of that is I don't want conspiracy theories to be a scapegoat for left-wing violence. And I felt like that's what it was starting to become because the facts are I think he was probably assassinated by a man who was radicalized by leftist ideology. There was probably a factor of wanting to stop transgender hate because to be honest, Kirk had made that a major portion of his platform talking about transgender violence.
Right.
And I think that's what happened. And that is a horrible thing in and of itself. But I don't want to see a scapegoating of like the Israeli government and robots or whatever Candace Owens is pushing today and others in order to deflect from the fact that left-wing violence is responsible for his assassination. That's bad enough and twisted enough in and of itself. We don't have to make it more interesting.
And that's an interesting angle too, because you're right. It does deflect from the issues on the left that are promoting violence. And I'm not here to pretend like all the political violence is on the left. Lately, most of it has been, but there's still been some right-wing violence too that is still happening, and it could happen more in the future. But to me, it's just I think the word grotesque is accurate, because when I saw her, and it wasn't just her, I mean Tucker Carlson kind of
Yeah.
floated those ideas, and some others as well. And I'm just like, I knew y'all were gonna do this, but did you really have to do it? Couldn't you have just proven me wrong for once?
Yeah.
Do you really have to exploit this man's death
Yeah.
to attack Israel just to get clicks? Because I'm not even convinced that they actually believe everything that they're
Yeah.
intimating, because they're not saying it outright, but they're,
No.
just asking questions. They're making statements in the form
Yeah.
of questions because they're cowards and they don't want to just come out and say it. And to me, it's just, how does that help anything except for them? But to me, I'm expecting them to do it. My frustration is with the
Yeah.
people falling for it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very frustrating. And I think that it's very sad that we've already heard that Erica Kirk is going to come out and like disprove some of these rumors. I found that to be horrifying. The fact that she has to, because this was announced prior to the memorial, she's going to go on a show and have to like discuss whether or not he was praying the rosary or becoming a Catholic or was offered money. Like, for example, just the religion things are none of anyone's business. It has no bearing on this. And the people who made it their personality to convince everyone that Charlie Kirk was converting to Catholicism. I don't think he was. I think that he enjoyed going to Mass, and we saw I don't know if it's executive director, one of his podcast hosts today, go on one of the shows and say he just liked the beauty of Catholic churches. Like there's nothing deeper than that here. He just wanted to see it. He wanted children to see that Christianity could build great things. But the fact that that has to be discussed to me shows the depravity that can go on in conservative politics. And I think the further sort of rumors, like none of this is particularly groundbreaking. There was a TPUSA event a few months ago that one of the people I work with went to, who said there were arguments between Jewish supporters, Israel supporters, and non-Israel supporters while they were there. Like these stories were already out, that there was pressure by people that were backing him to not have Tucker Carlson speak at America Fest. So the sort of repackaging them as if they're fresh news, I found ridiculous because I kept waiting to hear what the big thing was. Like to hear that some Jewish donors didn't want him to platform Tucker Carlson, that wasn't news. I knew about that
Uh,
months ago. So for Candace Owens, yeah, for Candace Owens and for like Tucker Carlson to try to latch onto it, I thought was ridiculous.
Yeah, it's almost like saying, guys, you aren't going to believe this, but this guy David Hogg loves gun control. I don't know if you guys knew that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
absolutely absurd. And the thing is, they get away with it because people don't think critically, and they know that. So the people question the
Yeah.
government, which we all should. I despise the government, so I'm always questioning it. I know it lies all the time, but it doesn't always lie because it doesn't always have to. But people don't
Mhm.
question the questioners. Like the people who are
Yeah.
just asking questions, y'all should be asking them questions, because so far they have not produced a shred of evidence. Everything they're
Mhm.
talking about is stuff that we already know. That whole Bill Ackman meeting. You had the other influencers who were there saying, no, this
Yeah.
wasn't an intervention. Yeah, of course,
Yeah.
people debate about Israel. If you're pro-Israel and you're a billionaire, then you want people to support Israel. That's common sense.
Right.
There's nothing shady, or at least not shadier than usual, going on here. So to me, it's disgusting. And to me, like Erica Kirk is going to come out, and I really believe she's going to debunk all of this. And what's sad
Yeah.
is that it's not going to matter, because they're still going to keep saying
Yeah.
the same thing. And they're not, I don't think that they're stupid enough to say that Erica Kirk is lying and calling her a liar. What they're going to say is,
Yeah.
oh, she's consumed by grief, or I'm predicting it. Oh, she's being pressured by Israel. She's being threatened, and her kids are being threatened. So she has to say this. That's what I predict, because even the truth, no matter how much you tell the truth, these people will still lie.
They will, and I think the other point of attack that'll be used against her, which I don't think she'll respond to kindly based off of her speech at that memorial, is that Charlie didn't tell her. The first person who says that Charlie didn't tell her something, I can't wait for the lawsuits that will be leveled and the destruction of that person politically. Because if there's one thing Erica Kirk is never going to play about, it's that Charlie Kirk didn't tell her something and
Mm.
that he was hiding something from her. So I think commentators, I really advise them to be extremely careful because it might be better to say that she's being blackmailed by a foreign government than to say that her husband was keeping her in the dark about something. I think she will take more offense to that.
Yeah, and as bad as it sounds, maybe they do need to be slapped down like that. I don't know. I mean, because if I were her, I'd be pissed. I mean, I'd be
Oh,
contacting
yeah.
the lawyers already. So I don't know. She shouldn't have to go through that. It really sucks. But I mean, I guess it is what it is. I mean, this is part of the business really, and it shouldn't be. But I want to talk
Yeah.
about the future. You were talking about different people who might be trying to crop up and fill Charlie's shoes. I mean, he was a very towering figure in the young conservative space, figuratively and physically. I mean, he was 6'4", like an inch taller than me. But is there anybody or any type of person that you see who might be positioned to fill the void that he left behind? Or do you think maybe it might look like something different? Because I mean, you can't really be Charlie Kirk because there was only one. But how do you see that playing out? Are there any people or types of people who you think uh, might take up the mantle, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, Brinlin from the RNC Youth Council wants to be Charlie Kirk, and that's extremely clear. He's on a speaking tour with Turning Point USA. He's positioning himself. I think he thinks that he can be a commentator like Charlie. That's certainly possible. He could go out there, he could talk, he could do keynote addresses. Like, that's totally on the table for him. He's eloquent, he's a podcaster. I think Nick Fuentes is trying a little bit of a rebrand right now to try to step into that spot, to be perfectly honest. I've seen the switch over in podcast appearances. There's something going on there where he's given it a good try. I will tell you that. Because I'm seeing clips of his that, like, in my feed, I would never see a Nick Fuentes clip. And all of a sudden, I'm seeing things on Instagram because he seems to have a new army of people constantly posting things that are not like the things he was saying before. It's stuff about economics and college debt. So he is really attempting it in a very cohesive way. I don't see anyone else specifically that will step in, but I think those two are the ones hitting it hardest. And what's interesting is that I don't think either of them understand what Charlie Kirk really was in a lot of ways, because he was not like a fame whore. He wasn't trying to be out there in the public like that. His producer, I believe, said today politics was beginning to bore him a little bit. Like,
Mhm.
he wanted to be even more in leadership. He wanted to change lives. He wanted to push faith more. So if you're looking for the next Charlie Kirk, I don't necessarily recommend that you look at a political commentator, rather that you look at somebody who's either built a business in this realm or in the libertarian realm, something like that, someone who has run a nonprofit, something like that. If you want someone who can build and strategize, look for somebody who's doing that or has done that in the past, who's at least young enough to talk to that audience.
Gotcha, gotcha. Do you think that there's a chance that Nicky Fuentes might, raise his a star a little bit because of this, or do you think it's going to fail?
I mean, he seems to be. I don't think it's necessarily like fail or not. He just seems to be doing it. He was on Russell Brand. He was on that podcast. I think it's like Patrick something, I forget his name, but he was on him this morning. He's been on InfoWars. I think it's interesting how the conservative world has sort of divided already. So Brinlin is being pushed by Fox and the neocon sector, the more traditional conservatives. And somebody's advising Nick Fuentes because he's never been this smart. He's never been able to pull himself in or whatsoever. Somebody's advised him to do some type of rebrand and to be more digestible and to be less antagonistic. So those two men are the ones I see rising up. I don't particularly think either one of them is going to attract the kind of love and support that Charlie Kirk did, because the thing is, Charlie Kirk was completely approachable and he was also living out his life as he told other people they should be. That's a very hard combination to find in conservative politics.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty rare, definitely.
Hmm.
And it does seem like there are certain forces or people who are pushing Nicky Fuentes. I don't know who Brenlin is. I don't think I know him. But so let me ask you this. Well, there's something you said that really stuck out to me, that a lot of younger conservatives, it might be a hard time for them because they feel like they're leaderless. Um,
Yeah.
and this isn't denigrating Charlie Kirk at all, but he was one man. It would.
Hmm.
if this is the case, then it seems like it's pretty necessary that you would need a movement that could survive something like that. I've
Yeah.
heard people speculate, oh, Turning Point USA is going to crumble without Charlie Kirk. I don't know if I buy that.
No.
But in general, I mean, it is kind of scary if the movement could possibly crumble or take a big hit because they lost a leader. How likely do you think that is to happen, or do you think that maybe it might reshape in a way that maybe there are multiple leaders that help to build the movement and move it forward rather than looking towards one or two people?
I think it is likely there'll be problems. I think it is likely that there will be substantial issues because the thing that Charlie Kirk did was, first of all, he was actually living out the principles he said. So, like, young women felt comfortable asking him advice about marriage because they saw him living that. And then she was affirming that so much. This is why they were such a good team in the public as well. He was saying what he thought was the design for life. And then she was saying he was upholding it, that even in harder times, he was actually doing it. So Kirk was completely approachable in that regard for women. People felt safe around him. And I think the problem we have now, also on a strategic level, the RNC sort of offshooted a lot of their youth engagement, I think the majority of it, as well as their voter outreach in certain areas, especially the Sun Belt, primarily Arizona, to Turning Point. So if you're looking at Turning Point going into the midterms, if we don't have somebody who understands the complete collaboration between media, strategy, youth engagement, all of that at the helm, I worry that on an operational level, the RNC and the Republican Party is going to suffer because I don't think people realize how much of Turning Point was running the day-to-day ground operation in a vast majority of swing states across this country. So there's a demoralizing feeling because they're leaderless. And then there's an operational problem. We could have Benny Johnson at the helm of the podcast. I'm not concerned about the podcast going forward. I'm concerned that the door knocking operation is going to suffer and that the sort of canvassing operation is going to be an issue because those are the things that Kirk was the mastermind behind.
Yeah, and that's something that you've been very critical of the Republican Party about. I mean, we've had many conversations about this, about how the Republican Party just really doesn't do a whole hell of a lot to reach younger voters or even,
Yeah.
minority voters or LGBTQ or, having that wider tent. And with the youth, I mean, that really was Charlie Kirk. I mean, the GOP didn't seem to be doing much at all. So
No.
I guess, I mean, I I'm wondering, it's going to be interesting to see where that goes because you almost need like an outside conservative group to reach out to this demographic because the party's not going to do it itself. So I mean, I guess it's hard to predict, but I mean, do you think this might possibly prompt the Republican Party to step up more, or do you think that there's going to have to be more on the outside that happens?
Well, the Republican Party is going to have to step up more. And the other part of this is that even if Kirk, like his commentary, everything, it all mattered. But the other side of this was he was an ethical leader. And we don't have a lot of those in Republican politics. So when money, for example, was given to Turning Point, it was used for what they said they were going to use it for. People drew reasonable salaries. There was not this over bloating in the same way there was with the RNC because it was not run by sort of like endless political nepotism in the same way the vast majority of Turning Point employees, aside from being like sons of pastors and things, they're not sons of politicians. They're not in that area. So we have a problem now in the ethics of it, which is why Erica Kirk had to be the CEO. I saw some people say, well, why isn't it Tyler Bauer? Why isn't it Justin? Why isn't the people at the helm? Because it has to be somebody beyond reproach because of the amount of money. They have an over $100 million operating budget annually. You
Hmm?
can't give that to somebody who's not beyond reproach. It has to be somebody, in my mind, who's living in that kind of level of faith because she has to be accountable to something higher. That was the system that Kirk built Turning Point on. In a lot of ways, it's modeled after a ministry project. So now that he's gone, her being at the helm to me is the only safe choice. The question is, on an operational level, does she understand the field game as much as Kirk did?
Yeah, and I guess we'll find out. But one thing that's been concerning me, going back to the issue of political violence in general, I mean, we already have people getting radicalized online, whether they're on the right or the left. And there are
Yeah.
people warning, and I've been looking at it too, that this assassination could radicalize maybe some of his followers or maybe others on the right in a
Yeah.
dangerous way. Do you see that risk as well, or how are you viewing the situation?
I do, and I have an unpopular opinion about that memorial service as well. I think that in some ways we didn't allow people to experience grief. Like in some ways, I think it was too filled with jubilation, and I think we have escaped the horror of what happened in a lot of people's mind, and that will settle in. Like to me, after I watched that, and it was very moving, but after I watched, I thought about the fact that she's still going home to a house that 2 weeks ago he was in and to clothes of his and to food he bought. Like she's in that. And it would have been, I think, better on a healing level to highlight some of that because when this is over and the dust is settled and the main stories in the news are not about this, because that will inevitably happen, there's going to be millions of young people that are at least disturbed by what's happened and are a little bit freaked out and scared and all of that. And we didn't really talk about that at the memorial. We didn't really discuss why it happened. We didn't discuss how we're going to stop it from happening to you, meaning other young conservatives, even people just attending events, not speaking. And we didn't discuss the fact that Charlie knew this was a possibility and that he was still going in and that that was sort of like that is the biggest gift he could give, putting his life out like that. I think it was almost too happy of an event, and I understand the wanting to feel that, but I think there's a lot of primarily young boys who are very twisted right now, and when the dust settles, I wonder who they're going to go to.
Yeah, it's a very sobering reality that maybe wasn't illustrated at the memorial. I
Yeah.
mean, even just, I was wondering why there wasn't more security at the event and at others. And I just, it is kind of scary because, I mean, I know at the memorial they were all speaking in front of that, shield, but I
Mhm.
guess it's just, you know, I mean, America is already a powder keg right now. And
Yeah.
I I think it's very likely that there could be something retaliatory that happens. And there also might be fewer conservatives who want to show up on college campuses because of this. They don't want to get killed for speaking their views. It might happen with people on the left. I mean, I've been working on this article about the rise in political violence over the past couple months or so. I've been interviewing experts, and they all believe that they were telling me before that this is going to spill out into the civilian world and not just
Mhm.
target government officials. And lo and behold, that's what happened. And I think it's going to get worse. But I, do you see any way to stop this, or maybe like reverse course on this, or do you think that maybe it's just going to get worse before it gets better? I mean, it's hard to be optimistic right now.
Yeah, I don't think there's a way to reverse course on like the trajectory of it being an issue. I think we need to acknowledge the seriousness. And th this was my takeaway from the memorial and everything. I think there was a lack of acknowledging how in danger everybody is because we are, and it's not something we can step away from. And the fact that Kirk was not Kirk, but the fact that the speakers were standing behind a plexiglass bulletproof screen, someone should have said, look at what we have to do even to have a memorial for him. Look at what we've been forced to do, that his wife has to stand behind bulletproof glass, much less the president and the rest of the cabinet, because there's that level of threat. And we could extend that to the left. We could say for a leftist memorial, they would have to do that too. And that's wrong. And that's a problem. So I don't think we can stop it. But everybody who wants to sort of say like it's okay because he is in heaven now and so it's sort of like it's all right. It's not all right. It's not all right that he's gone. And oddly enough, I sort of saw Nick Fuentes talking about this. Like he was like, this is not okay. Like this is not all right because of Christianity. And I think that that's sort of the mistake here a little bit because there are a lot of people in this country who are not Christians, who are not religious,
Yeah.
but who are conservative and who look at this and go, right, but for me or for her, how do I deal with it? Because I'm not at peace over it. I'm not at peace that he's okay there because of how he lived. We're still in danger here. And I think that the leader we need for that isn't clear. Trump's comment about how he doesn't pray for his enemies or he doesn't forgive them, to me, was one of the realest moments at that entire memorial. I thought it was very clear. And it was kind of like, let's come back down to reality here. When he said that, I thought that's going to be the thing people identify with the most. And that shows, and then going on Twitter, that was one of the things that shows that people are not settled and people are not at peace, no matter how much we might want them to be.
Yeah, I mean, I took it as more of like a tongue-in-cheek type of thing, but also that is true, that is how he feels and how a lot of other people feel. I mean, I think he was only really channeling what others already feel, which is why I think that this is going to continue to escalate. And I don't know. I mean, even the experts that I spoke with weren't sure how to calm this thing down. And really, it's just going to have to get to a point to where the majority just gets sick of it because not everybody on
Yeah.
the left is violent. The vast majority are not violent. Even JD Vance said that. The majority of people on the right are not
Mhm.
violent and they don't want their neighbors dead. But it's that loud fringe minority who may not engage in the violence themselves, but will contribute to the political climate that can lead to
Yeah.
violence. At the end of the day, the responsibility is with the person who pulls the trigger. But we can't deny that there are certain forces that might inspire some of this. I mean, I think there's a lot of blame being going around at the media. I mean, I think people even watch this and me even suggesting that somebody on the right might commit violence. They're going to say, oh, no, the right doesn't do violence. That's only the left. But then you have the left saying, oh, well, the guy who killed Kirk wasn't even on the left. I mean, they're lying about it, obviously, but still, this tribalism is preventing people from being honest. So, I mean, when it comes to Kirk's assassination and other political violence, I mean, who do you really think bears the responsibility for the environment that led
Mhm.
to this?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question because I think that we glorified young conservatives being attacked going back to the Berkeley riots with Ben Shapiro. I think a lot of young conservatives got a message from there, including me, because I was in that exact age range when that was happening. We got a message from that, from conservatives, like making it a big famous thing, that it was okay for us to be spit at, harassed, screamed at because of what we believe, because that's the cost to being a young conservative. And I thought then that that was a very dangerous precedent because what ended up happening was that many, many commentators and authors and things went out to try to get harassed to become famous.
Oh,
And then it
yeah.
created this snowball where that grew. So if you were spit at or had a coffee thrown at you, I think Candace and Kirk, no, Tommy Lahren had a coffee thrown at her at some point. It got you on Fox and Friends. So the environment that caused the situation where we now think this is normal, that's on conservatives. We normalized that. And older
Mhm.
conservatives who kind of had a perverse fascination with watching young people be attacked for their viewpoints, that's on them. In terms of the radicalization of like beliefs that lead to anarchy, that's on the left. They push Marxism, they push communism, those ideas that
Sure.
everybody is your political enemy. We don't push that kind of thing. But the idea that violence was just going to happen to us was very toxic. And I think even someone like Kirk or Ben Shapiro, they got numb to it, that it was just how they had to live their lives. And that's a very sad thing. When that started happening, I saw young conservatives pretty much say, well, we're just going to probably be punched or kicked or at least screamed at. And that's just the process. That should never have been the process.
That is a very interesting point. You know, that's it's something that I've noticed, but I didn't really think about it all that much. But I think you're right. And I don't think that people were doing this on purpose, but yeah, it was glorifying to be able to
Yeah.
go out there and get something thrown at you or have people threaten you.
Mhm.
I know with black conservatives, you know, the moment somebody on the left calls them the N-word or calls them a coon or
Yeah.
Uncle Tom, they're right on
Yeah.
Twitter saying, look at what this leftist says to me.
Hmm.
Then you get clout, clicks, and
Yeah.
cash. I mean, that's just the way it works. And the other part of it too is that, but this should be reported on, right? I mean, if people are out there throwing
Yeah.
concrete milkshakes at people for having certain views, then yeah, that should be reported on. But there's a difference between in people knowing that it happened and then I don't even know what the word is. I don't think glorifying is the right word, even though it kind of fits. I think maybe just really elevating that onto a pedestal, and then
Yeah.
that's how you have to get your clout. You know, yeah, I've had Antifa scream at me, and I punched out an Antifa guy who punched me or whatever. I mean, and it just seems like something that we've talked about before, how a lot of this has become more performative than persuasive. Do you
Yeah.
think do you think that issue is still the same, or do you think it's gotten worse, or maybe better? Or
Yeah, I think it's worse now. I think it's worse because we've seen so many bad things. So now for you to be a victim of the left takes more. So previously you just had to be surrounded and screamed at. Now you have to be hit or someone has to be attacked.
Mhm.
And it's a very dangerous thing. And I remember being like a very young commentator in 2018, 2019. And I never thought it was okay for me to be screamed at or hit or like harassed and encircled for having a speech. And people used to say that I wasn't brave enough to be a young conservative. And I used to say, no, no, I don't want to be attacked. I don't mind if someone debates me. That's fine. Even if it's a loud debate, fine. But I'm not going to be encircled and possibly assaulted because this is how it is now. And people used to tell me across the board, well, that's like, you don't get it. You're not cool enough. You don't understand what it takes. You're not going to work hard enough. We also misconstrued this idea that working hard meant being willing to be assaulted. And this
Mm.
became a really dangerous powder keg where I would work as many hours as possible. I'd do the unpaid internships, I'd do broadcasting stuff, whatever it was. But again, I'm not going to stand there and have my safety threatened for saying that capitalism has helped America. This is not hate speech. These are not radical ideas. This is not something that's going to lead to someone's harm. And Turning Point, in a lot of ways, is a talent agency of getting young conservatives out there. And I think a lot of them right now have an idea that that's just part of the process. I'd love to suppress that idea. I would love for people to realize they can be treated with human dignity and also be conservative youth commentators.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if anything, you should want those incidents to be more rare than common. And yet,
Yeah.
you're right. I mean, there are. I won't name names, but there are not even that are younger. I mean, there are people my age, maybe a little bit younger or older, who will do whatever they need to do to get punched or kicked or what have you, so that they can say, "Oh, look
Yeah.
how bad the left is. Look what happened to me. I'm out here in the trenches." And it is very performative. And I think, yeah, that Turning Point has kind
Mhm.
of functioned as a talent agency for better or for worse. That's not inherently bad all on its own, but
Right.
they're not the only ones. It just seems like it's more about the show than about the ideas. And I think when you're
Yeah.
not focused on the ideas, you're focused on whatever's going to get you the most attention, whatever's going to get you the most money or the most clicks. And we're not really even having discourse at this point where you're just going on a stage and saying as many different sound bites as possible so it can go viral on social media instead of actually engaging with people who disagree with you and actually trying to counter their ideas in a civil atmosphere the way it should be.
That's very true. And I think that also a lot of young conservatives have no idea how to do debate. And we're going to see that in the next couple of years because Kirk was a debater, Ben Shapiro is a debater, Michael Knowles is, Matt Walsh is in certain categories. But all of them have basic skill sets. Allie Beth Stuckey can do a good debate about a variety of topics. A lot of young conservatives have never debated because the idea kind of was they're just going to do individual commentary. And I remember when that switch happened and I thought it was dangerous, then it still is, because the main debater they had was Kirk. He would go and he could do pretty much every issue down the political spectrum. That was kind of the thing that made him stand out, that would let his clips go viral. You could yell at him about Marxism and gender ideology in the same day, and he could handle everything. So now, a lot of young conservatives have no debate skills. They think it's normal to be assaulted. They think that they have to take massive personal safety risks to trend. And I'm worried about the generation of leaders we get from that. And I was speaking to another commentator who said, I want to see people Vance's age and older as actual leaders of the nation. I don't want to see a 20-year-old in Congress or even like that kind of age group because they're not really ready for that. And I say that as someone in my 20s. There's no position in that I think is a good idea. Remember Madison Cawthorn, who was a member of Congress for, I believe, North Carolina? So he was the youngest GOP congressman, or like in general, or
I'm sorry, but
congressperson in general.
the audience knows exactly why we're laughing right now, but I'm not going to talk
Yeah.
about it.
No. I mean, that to me was the biggest evidence, if there ever was evidence, that perhaps we give people like a little bit longer to mature before we highlight them as the future of the Republican Party.
Do you think that there was somebody who a few months ago who got in trouble for saying that people on the right see politics more as entertainment than anything else, and I've been saying that for years, but it's not just on the right. Uh, it just
Yeah.
seems, but it seems like that's where we're headed for more of that, based on what I'm seeing. Is that what you're seeing as far as, because you're in the trenches there talking to younger conservatives?
Mhm.
Is that what you're seeing too?
Yeah, that is what I'm seeing. And I think that It's actually, I think the left views it more seriously than conservatives do. I think the left views it as you're in a battle for the soul of the nation and everything. And for better or for worse, they're in like constant fight or flight. We have to stop the Nazis from taking over kind of thing. And the right, a lot of the people who are supposedly warriors for conservatism really don't care. It really doesn't matter to them. It's irrelevant to them. And I say that in the nicest way possible because they're still doing good work, but it's not their do or die thing. And then there are people who it does really matter for. And I think in terms of it being about entertainment, if you want it to be entertaining in politics, that's fine. Host a debate, have the most like crazy topics possible be in that debate, have a panel event, write an article. But it doesn't have to be entertaining in that young conservatives, like remember when Riley Gaines was followed around and harassed because she was at an event and she had to barricade herself in a room. That's not entertaining because that's going to happen to everybody eventually, just based off of the numbers at a college campus.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when I saw that, I wasn't thinking, yeah, this is fun. I was thinking, man, I hope she, exercises her Second Amendment right. I mean, I say that as a joke, but not really, because I mean, at the same
Yeah.
time, I mean, that's one thing. I mean, this isn't like the civil rights movement where people were getting hit by fire hoses,
No,
attacked by police dogs.
no.
Nonviolence in that aspect was a strategy designed to get a certain
Yeah.
response. It wasn't just for entertainment. These people were fighting for something real. And to me, if you're acting more like today's political scene is more entertainment, then that tells me that this isn't really a serious thing to you. I mean, and you're right. I mean, the
Yeah.
entertainment aspect is on the left, but not to the same extent. I mean, yeah, the left believes, or at least pretends to believe, that their opponents are Nazis. If you think you're being confronted with Nazis, yeah, you're going to take it seriously. I think that we are we are being threatened by more authoritarianism coming from both sides of the political spectrum. So I take it seriously. This stuff isn't always entertaining to me, but I don't believe that a lot of people on the right actually believe that because they're only really saying, oh, the left sucks. They can't define what a woman is. That's all valid. I get it. At the same time, they're not really treating this as a real existential threat by and large. I'm not talking about everybody. I'm just saying by and large, that's
Yeah.
what our media environment is producing.
Well, that's very true. And I think that conservatives also have an idea that Donald Trump is going to save them from everything. And
That's
this is the other part of it. We think that Trump is the savior of us all. And at the end of this administration, he's no longer in power. For better or for worse, he's just not. And I don't think conservatives realize that when he's gone, a lot of the strength, the leadership, it goes with him just because he can't be president anymore. And I have an issue with the idea that we're just going to make JD Vance the nominee for president. I think it's ridiculous. To be perfectly honest, I think it's ridiculous. I think the idea that a one-term senator who never really worked in in like the blue collar world or really has any idea about having a company or running anything he's just going to step into running America. I think it's nonsense. And I thought it was nonsense then. I thought that he would help Trump get elected. But it's interesting because you have to separate it when you're in a political race between who will help govern and who will help get elected. And sometimes you have to go with who will help get elected because the guy who'll help govern won't help you get elected. And it's a nasty balancing act. They talked about that a lot with Reagan and Bush. He knew that Bush could help him get elected. He didn't necessarily have faith in him helping govern. He turned out to be wrong, but he didn't in that moment have faith. And the idea that we're just going to make JD Vance president to continue on, I will tell you, the young conservative world is not cohesive on that. And there's a lot of debate, and a lot of people think that he is too involved in sort of like the technocratic world. And I think the
self
battle in
included.
2028 is going to be is going to be very vicious because I myself don't think that he's qualified to run this country. And I don't mean that on a political level. Donald Trump had run a massive multinational organization for like 30 years. He had dealt with foreign leaders. He had dealt with even like permit processes and payroll and all of these things. I don't think JD Vance, coming from his background, better or worse, meaning his professional background, not as he grew up, can run America in the way that we're accustomed to with the efficiency and the winning that Donald Trump delivers.
But I mean, it worked with Obama, didn't it? He was only a senator for like 5 minutes. You saw how that turned out. Oh, wait, no.
Yeah, it's that kind of vibe, but it's that kind of vibe. That's how I feel. When I see JD Vance, I think, okay, he'll try to advance things I care more about. but we all understand that he's basically a child. And he even said in a podcast appearance, my job is just to talk to people. I just go on podcasts and I talk to people. And he meant it. And I was like, well, good for him that he means it. I don't think that means you should then be president.
Yeah, really. So that actually leads me to my next question then. If you had a magic wand and you can wave it and create a healthy and principled and resilient conservative youth movement, what would that look like going forward?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it would look like, first of all, the understanding that we do not have to be assaulted to be heard. That would be the main point of it. And then we would have specific things that we want delivered for our generation in order to get support from us for candidates. And this was something that Charlie had started to do recently, where he would say, we want you to find this, to have this position at least when it comes to lowering the rate to get houses. We want you to deal with college debt and audit colleges in order to have a system to find out what it really costs to go to schools. For me, if I was running the young conservative world, we would have things that would actually help us in our daily lives. Not a lot that's done in the young conservative movement under anybody has actually assisted young people in daily life. It assists them in terms of having political influence. And the second part of that is that I think that the media operation behind Young Conservatives has become weird in a lot of ways. Like, I don't really understand what the majority of the podcasts and things accomplish. I think that some of them are niched very well, like the Make America Healthy Again movement. I get that. I understand the principle of it. People come on, they talk about those things. People in sports, I like those things make sense to me. I think young conservatives should not just be encouraged to go into commentary. They should be encouraged to go into digital strategy, communications. I do those things. Law. We always had a leg up on the legal system because we had young people who would go into law school and come out like legal vipers for us. And liberals were always scared of the Federalist Society. They were scared of the systems that we would produce young lawyers from. It was terrifying for them. I'm seeing less of that, and I'm concerned about that because if we have less viper lawyers, Democrats get more court battle wins. And I don't think people realize that equation as much anymore.
And I think you're right. And I think we're seeing with this administration that a lot of the stuff is being fought in courts. I mean, every time Trump sneezes,
Yeah.
they file a lawsuit against the sneeze. I mean, and this is something that I
Yes.
tell libertarians about too, especially if you're in the liberty movement or the libertarian party. I mean, just doing podcasts and living online ain't going to cut it. I'm not knocking
Not
it.
enough.
I live online. I mean, that's it's part of my job to be chronically online. But you also have to get down in the weeds. You got to actually show what libertarianism is at the ground level. I mean, you have to have an activist class that isn't just out there to just say vote for this party, but say, oh, wait a minute. Your city is trying to throw you in jail because you're feeding the homeless. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and stand against that. We're going to protest. We're going to
Yeah.
to write letters to government officials. We're going to take action, put it into action instead of just talking about it. That's a problem that libertarians have. We like to get heady into all these academic debates, but don't actually do anything. It's
Yes.
starting to change. There are a lot of libertarians who are doing work on the ground and actually getting attention for it. I would think that with young conservatives, they got to start putting some of this stuff into action themselves, whether it's through the court system or even just promoting conservative values in their local communities. So last question. Um, there are a lot of young and old and middle-aged conservatives who are feeling discouraged, angry, disillusioned, and not just because of Kirk's assassination, but because of other issues as well. What would you say to young conservatives who are feeling this way? I mean, maybe there's a lot of conservatives who aren't
Yeah.
done mourning Charlie Kirk, but maybe they're wondering where they're going to go because they know that Trump isn't going to be the emperor. He's not going to be president forever.
Yeah.
What would you say to them? What
Yeah.
would you tell them to do?
Well, I would tell them that they do not have to live and die by Donald Trump and the Trump family. And you can admire Donald Trump and the family and not necessarily want to be part of it. Like, we have created them as a royal family, and that's very dangerous because when he steps out of politics, people will be demoralized. And I'm very concerned about that. And I think in addition to that, I would say you need to figure out what part of this country you specifically want to get something from. that you want to influence? Do you want to fix economics? Do you want to have legal victories? Do you want to be in commentary because it's genuinely your passion and calling? Because you don't just have to be a talking head. And I dislike this idea in young conservatism that that's what you have to be now to get anywhere. That's not the case. You could be a viper lawyer who ends up as a Supreme Court justice and never have an Instagram account. That can happen. And we've sort of dispelled this idea that it can. I would love for young conservatives to believe in their own talents separate from having like a media radio person tell them that they can do it. I'd love for them to go to law school. I'd love for them to go into private sector world and say to them, open a business. And then when it's doing great and you're older, run for Congress. You don't have to live and die by being a media personality. This was my calling. This is the thing that I think I'm good at doing. But if I thought I was good at being in law, I would have gone down that path. You have to understand you have a variety of options and we don't all need to be famous. You can do so much and have so much impact and not necessarily be famous because a lot of young conservatives don't want to be. It's not a political side that necessarily brings out wanting to be super famous and talk about your feelings all the time. You can lean away from that if you want to.
Amen. Amen. If I didn't feel like this was my calling, I definitely wouldn't be chronically online because that can really mess with your head and you got to take breaks. So I'm definitely with you on
Yes.
that. Even though I love what I do, not everybody has to do it. So before we sign off, why don't you let everybody know where they can find you?
Sure, you can find me on Twitter at Magdalen Rose, Maghdalen Rose. And then also my show airs, sorry about that. My show airs every Saturday night at 9 p.m. Eastern on Twitter. Thank you.
Awesome. And to the audience, until next time, stay free, stay principled, and most importantly, stay ungovernable.